We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 29b. On the previous Amud, Abaye said that when we say that if a person admits that he owes money, but he does not say Atem Eidai, he doesn't say that you are the witnesses to my admission, so then we said the halacha is that if he says I was just joking the next day, that's fine, we accept that claim. And Abaye says that's only if he says I was joking. But if he says Lo Hayu Devarim Me'olam, if he says that I never admitted, that never happened, when we know it really did happen, Huchza Kafran, so then he's considered to have a presumption as being a liar. And Rashi explains Lo Hayu Devarim Lo Hodesi Lach. If he says I never admitted to you when he really did, there are witnesses that heard that he admitted, so then already Huchsa Kafran Ve'eno Nemon Olav Bishvua. So at that point in time, he's considered to be a liar, and he's no longer trustworthy in terms of taking a Shvua. And the Gemara continues, the Mesoras Hashas has Amar Lei Rav Papa Bereder Rav Acha Barada. Rav Papa, the son of Rav Acha Barada, said back to him, Hachi Amrinon Mishmei de Rava. This is what we say in the name of Rava. Kol Mili Dechdi, anything that's a frivolous matter, something that's not really important. Lo Dechiri Inshi, people don't really remember. And so therefore, even in a situation, let's say the person admitted and there were hidden witnesses, and then the next day he says, I never admitted, we actually don't consider that person to be a liar, because it's quite possible he simply doesn't remember because it was unimportant. And Rashi explains, Kalmili dechdi lo dechiri inshi, people don't remember things that are unimportant. Dvarim shel chinam, means to say things that are not important. Kolomar means to say, Hoel va'osa hoda divrei ruach, hayu shehishta bo, since that admission, he was just teasing, it was just a joke. Lo dechiri inshi, it's possible he doesn't even admit it. It's possible, rather, he doesn't even remember it. V'shachach osa hoda, he forgot about that admission, and so therefore he's not considered to have the presumption of being a liar in that situation, according to Rava. And the Gemara continues, there was a person who hid some witnesses in the canopy of the bed. Amar Le, and then he said to the person, Mana li biyadcha, you owe me a money. Amar Le said to him, Hein, yes, I do owe you the money. Amar, so then he said, Iri v'shichvi lahava alach sahadi, let those who are awake and those who are sleeping, can they be witnesses to your admission? Amar Le lo, he said, no, I don't want them to be, I don't accept them as witnesses. Amar Rav Kahana says, Amar Le lo, he said to him, no, he didn't accept them as witnesses, therefore it's not a situation of atem edai, you are the witnesses to my admission, and that's not considered to be a good admission. And the Gemara continues, there was a person who he hid some witnesses in a grave that was nearby where he was trying to get his friend to admit. Amar Le said to him, you owe me a money. Amar Le said to him, Hein, yes, I owe you the money. And the person said, let the living and the dead be witnesses to your admission. Amar Le lo, he said, no, I don't want them to be witnesses. Amar Rav Shimon says, so Amar Le lo, he said, no, and therefore they're not considered witnesses. Amar Ravina v'Tamer Rav Papa, Ravina said, and some say Rav Papa said, Shma mina meha, you see from this, Hadamar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, that which Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, Tzarech sheyomar atem edai, again, the person who's admitting, he needs to say, you are my witnesses to this admission. Lo shna ki amar lova, so you see from the above stories, it doesn't matter if the borrower said atem edai, v'lo shna ki amar malva v'shasik lova, and it doesn't matter, let's say the lender would say you are witnesses, and the lova would be quiet, that also would be sufficient. That would be the same thing as the lova saying atem edai. Time bad amar lova lo, because the reason in the above cases why the witnesses were not considered witnesses is because the borrower explicitly said, no, I don't want them to be witnesses. Avali shasik, but let's say he was just silent, hachinami, so then indeed they would be witnesses, and therefore you see again that if the malva is the one that says atem edai, and the lova is silent, that would be considered a genuine atem edai. And the Gemara continues, there was a person who they referred to him as a kav of debts, meaning to say, they used to refer to him in that fashion because he owed a lot of people money. Amar, he said, Man masik bi el ploni uploni. He said, there's nobody that I owe money to except for so-and-so and so-and-so. Azu tavu ladina kami de Rav Nachman. So those people who he admitted that he owed money to, they went and they brought him to court in front of Rav Nachman. Amar Rav Nachman said, Adam asoi shalola hasbias atzmo. Sometimes a person will say that he owes money when he doesn't really owe money because he doesn't want to make it look like he is rich, like he's overly satisfied. Therefore, that admission is not worth anything. And the Gemara continues, there was a person, they referred to him as the mouse who sleeps on dinarim. Essentially, they were referring to him as a miser. He hoards all of his money, he never spends it. When he was dying, Amar, he said, Planya, Masku Bezuz, he said, so-and-so and so-and-so, I owe them money. Basar de Shachif, so then after he died, Asu Tavinu Liyarshin, so these people, they came claim, and they claim their money from the Yorshim, from the heirs. Asu l'kamid Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, they came before Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi for a ruling. Amar Lui said to them, Ki amrinan adam asay shelo lahasbi'as atzma. When we say that a person's admission is not worth anything because the person doesn't want to make himself seem like he's rich, hani mili mechayim, that's true when the person's alive. Aval achar misa, but if it's already after death, so then we don't say that. So then we say that this admission is considered an effective admission. So paru palga, so then the heirs, they paid half of what they owed. Tavinu ledina leidach palga, so then they brought them to court to pay the other half. And also l'kami de Rabbi Chia, that case came before Rabbi Chia. Amar Lu, he said to them the opposite of the ruling of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. He said, Keshem sha'adam asur shelo lahasbi'as atzmo, just like a person might admit, and it's not a real admission, he's just doing it so he doesn't seem wealthy. Kach adam asur shelo lahasbi'as banav, so too a person might admit, so that it won't seem that his children are wealthy, and therefore you don't know anything. So Amrulay, so now the Yarshim said to him, Nazel v'nahader, so let's go and let's retract that earlier ruling. We paid half, we shouldn't have paid anything. Amar Lu, so he said to them, Kvar ho rezakin, the elder, he already issued a ruling, meaning the ruling that Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi already issued will stand. That half that you paid is paid, but you don't have to pay the other half. And the Gemara continues, Hoda b'fnei shnayim, let's say a person admits that he owes a debt in front of two people, the kanu miyadu, and they make a formal act of acquisition in order to solidify that admission, so then kosvin, so then those two witnesses, they're able to write up a document. They can essentially turn that not only into an oral loan, but it can be considered a written obligation, a written loan. Vimlav, and if not, let's say they don't make a kinyan, they don't make a formal acquisition to the admission, ein kosvin, so then they're not allowed to write up a document. It could be he prefers that it be considered a milva alpeh, an oral loan, and not a milva bishtar, not a loan with a document. Bifnei shlosha v'lo kanu miyado. Now, what if he admits in front of three people and they don't have a formal acquisition along with the admission? So there we have a machlokus whether we write a document or not. Rav Amar Kosvin, Rav says we do write a document. Ravasi Amar in Kosvin, Ravasi says we don't write a document. Have uvda v'choshle Rav l'had Ravasi. There was a case, and Rav actually was concerned with the ruling of Ravasi, and he did not write up a document. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ada Barava, Rav Ada Barava says, Ha'udisa, when it comes to a document of admission, Zimnan kasvinan v'zimnan lo kasvinan. Sometimes we write that document and sometimes we do not. Kenivi v'yasvi, let's say three people are already gathered and they're sitting, lo kasvinan, so they're not considered judges even though it's three people. They're not automatically considered a court, and we don't write up the document. But kanfinu ihu, but let's say the person who's admitting he gathered the judges, then already kasvinan, then already we do write up that document. Rav Amar Rava says, Afilu kanfinu iu, even if he gathered them, lo kasvinan, we do not write up the document, ad Amar lahu, havu alai dayone, unless he actually says, I want you to act as judges. Mar bar Ravashi Amar Mar bar Ravashi says, Afilu Amar havu alai dayone, even if he says, I want you to be judges, lo kasvinan, we do not write up a document, ad kavi duchta, until they establish themselves in their place as a court, v'shalchiu mezamni leila vedina, and they send someone in order to summon him to court. They have to act completely as a court. Only then do we write up the document. And the Gemara continues, let's say he admits with regards to movable objects, v'kanu miyadu, and they make a formal act of acquisition in terms of the admission, kosvin, then we write up a document, vimlav, and if not, in kosvin, we do not write up a document. But let's say that admission is by land, v'lo kanu miyadu, and they don't make a formal act of acquisition, what would be the halacha? Do you write that up or not? Ameimar Amar in kosvin, Ameimar says we don't write up a document, Mar Zutra Amar, kosvin, Mar Zutra says we do write up a document, v'hilchasa, and the halacha is kosvin, we do write up the document when it comes to land. And Rashi explains, v'kanu miyadu, let's say they make a kinyan, kosvin shtar hoda, so if they make a kinyan, then we do write up the shtar hoda. V'afa b'shalo amar kisvin, even though he didn't say to write it up, the stam kinyan l'chsiva omid, because just making a kinyan, we can assume that that's meant to be written. V'imlav ein kosvin, if not, we don't write it. V'afa gav damar lu atameda, even though he says you're my witnesses, v'chayiv l'shalin lo, he's certainly chayiv to pay. Afilu hachi nichale milva al pemi, milva b'shtar, still he prefers it to be an oral loan rather than a loan with a document. Shlosha, let's say there are three people, Asa and Bezdin, then already they're like a Bezdin, V'hefker and Hefker. Bezdin has the power to render things ownerless. V'yachol l'shanoso lasos milva b'shtar, and they're able to actually change it to make it into a milva b'shtar. V'lios b'makam halova lasos shliach l'kosva, and they can be in the place of the love of the borrower to appoint the shliach in order to write up that document. Odisa, let's say you have a shtar hoda, let's say you have a document of admission b'fnei shlosha, shelo kana miyado, again it's in front of 3 people but no kinyan was made. Knifi v'yasvi shlosha shayoshin, if they were just happened to be sitting there, uba v'hoda lo b'fneim, and he came and admitted in front of them, hoel v'lo zimnun v'kipsum lakach, since he didn't arrange it and gather them for that purpose, lo nasu bezin, they're not considered a court, ela edim, they're just considered witnesses. The deal me'ilo have el trey, have a modele kamayu, because maybe even if, let's say, there were just 2 of them, he would have done the same admission. V'lo have him hader achar bezin, he was not necessarily pursuing a court. Kanfinu iu kasvina. Now, if he gathered the 3 of them, then we do write it up. The midakanef talasa daite abedin. If he's gathering 3 people, he is thinking that it should be a court. The kavi duchta, and then the Gemara said it has to be only if they actually establish a place kederech hadayan, and they have to be acting like judges. V'shalchu shliach v'shemayu lelova lemesek kamayu ledina, and they send out a messenger in their name to summon him to court, to summon the lova to court. V'oduye, and then he admits. V'hoel v'omid bedin nasas kamil v'bishtar shagluya lakol hilkach kasvina. At that point, once he's standing in court, it becomes like a milva bishtar, alone with a document, because everybody understands he owes the money, and therefore we do write up the document. And then the Gemara said that by land it might be different. Karka shaya Ruvain muchzak bava hodel Shimon shishalo. Ruvain right now he holds possession over this land, but he admits to Shimon that the land belongs to him. So then, when we do write a document to hakevan to odi le dideyu v'lo michzar guvaina, because the moment the person admits that Shimon owns the land, Shimon doesn't even need to collect that land. It all stays in one place. Land doesn't move around. You're not lacking any collection, and it's his right away. To bishlama metaltli, I understand by movable objects, milva lahotzanin, the things that are movable could be spent. V'chov b'yalma, who essentially he's just saying he owes him a debt. Umilva apereya milva b'shtar, and an oral loan is not as strong as a loan with a document. V'lo nicho leilalume, he doesn't want to make it a stronger kind of debt. Avalacha, but here when you're talking about land, so the land already automatically belongs to Shimon if Ruvain admits that it's Shimon's. Giluye milsa ba'alma, we're just revealing, so to speak, we're making it clear publicly that it belongs to Shimon, and so we would write up that document. And the Gemara continues, Ravina ikla ledimharya, Ravina went to Dimharya, Amar le Ravdimi bar Ravhuna mi Dimharya le so Ravdimi, the son of Ravhuna from Dimharya, he said to Ravina, metaltali ve'isnu beinayumai, what about if a person admitted with regards to movable objects, but they're right here in front of us, what's the halacha then? Amar le said to him, kimekarkai damu, that's just like land, you don't need to collect it, that automatically goes to the other person, so you can write up a document. Ravashi Amar Ravashi says, kevin the mechasri guvaina, since it still has to be collected at the end of the day, it is a movable object. So no, we do not treat it like land. Rather, we treat that like a movable object. And the Gemara continues, Hayi Odisa, there was a document of admission, and Rashi says, Hayi Odisa, Shnayim Chasum Oleh, there were 2 people signed on this document. Delo have a kasaba, but it was not written in that document what normally is written there, the following line, Amar Lona, that he said to us, Kisvu v'chismu v'havule, write it and sign it and give it to him. That line was not written in the document, and so the question was, do we assume that document is good or not? Because as we said, 2 witnesses are not supposed to write up a document of admission if there was no formal kinyan. And the Gemara says, Abaye v'Rava damri tarvayu, Abaye and Rava both say, Hainu de Reish Lakish, that's the same as the following case of Reish Lakish. The Amar Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said, Chazaka ein ho'edim chosman al ashtar, there's a presumption that witnesses will not sign a document, elim kein nasa gadol, unless it was done by adults, it was done properly, and the same thing over here, even though they left out that one line, but it can be assumed that this document was written properly, and they only wrote the document upon the instruction of the lova, of the borrower, to write that document. And Rashi explains, Nasa Gadol, it was done with an adult, Hamocher, meaning the seller, the Kaim Velon Velimucher B'nechseyavat Shihei Ben Esrim. If you want to sell property of his father, he has to be 20 years old, he has to be a certain age. So we assume there's a chazaka that they're only going to sign if the person is the right age. Hachanami here also, Kevin Deshnaim Lomotzi Kosvi Ela Birashuso, since the 2 of them cannot write this document without the permission of the borrower, Vadai Iu Amarlu, even though that wasn't written in the document, he certainly told them to write the document, and we can assume that that is a good document. And the Gemara continues, Maskefla Rav Papi asks on this, V'itemer Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua, some say Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua asks on this, Mi'ika midi da'anon lo yadin, is there some halacha that we don't even know this halacha? V'sofrei de beidina yadin, you're saying that the scribes of the court, they know that halacha? Rashi says, da'anon lo yadin, we don't even know this halacha. Kolomar yesh dayon and harbe, meaning there are many judges, she'ein bekiyin b'halacha, they're not experts in this halacha. Shamarnu deshnayim shelo kanu miyado ein kosvan, that we said that if 2 people, if two people, there's no kinyan that's formally made, we shouldn't write up a document. Even judges don't know that halacha. And now you're assuming the scribes know that halacha. Maybe they simply do not know that halacha, and they wrote up this document, even though there was no formal kinyan, even though the Lova did not tell them to write the document. How can you say that the document is good? But the Gemara continues, Shalinu l'sofrei de Abaya. They actually asked the scribes of Abaya whether they knew this halacha, and it turned out v'yadi they did actually know this halacha. And l'sofrei de Rava, they also asked the scribes of Rava v'yadi, and they also knew the halacha. So it's not actually true. There are certain halachas, certain particulars, which judges might not know, but the scribes, it's their profession, they are aware of that detail. And the Gemara continues, Hahi Odisa, there was again a document of admission to have a Kasav Bey, and it was written in there, Duchran Piskami, that there is a record of the proceedings. And Rashi explains, Duchran Piskami, Lohaya Kasav Ba, Zichron Eidos, Beloshan Eidim. The point is, it wasn't written in the same language that witnesses would write something. Ela Beloshan Zichron Devarim, rather it was not Zichron Eidos, but Zichron Devarim. There was this record of the proceedings. V'huloshan Dayanim, that would be a language that is specifically used by judges. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph.